Great. Look, so I'm Martin. I'm Sales Director for Research Now. I'm based in Singapore and I look after Southeast Asia and China. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here today, along with Sally, who's the Managing Director for Luma Research, and she's among the first in Australia to take part in moving mobile forward. And we actually run a study about just over 12 months ago, which would have been one of the first mobile studies in Australia, and that was utilising Luma's proprietary ad impact solution. So to kick off the presentation, I'm going to set the scene a little bit. Just have a think about the last time you were at the movies or watching a film at home and recognising a character. You weren't quite sure who they were or where they're from, and I know I've been here because this actually happened to me recently, and it was this particular movie in question. I was at the cinema watching the new Bond film, and I knew that I recognised the young Q from somewhere, but I wasn't sure where from. So it was driving me a bit insane as I was racking my brain where to think I'd seen him before. Listing the movies and the TV show possibilities in my head, and then started to pay less attention to the movie itself. Fortunately, thanks to smartphones, Google could now save the day. So now we can pick up our phones and search the answer to everything and anything at almost any time. I was able to quickly Google young Q and not only find the actor's name, but a whole wealth of information around him. Turns out the new Q is Ben Whishaw, who's an English actor. He is a twin, and he appeared in Layer Cake with Daniel Craig in 2004, and that must have been where I recognised him from. So with this in mind, and among other things, the opportunity for near-instant knowledge with smartphones are now becoming an integral part of our lives, and for many people it already is. Now I know I'm not the only one who will return home if they leave their phone behind or wakes up in the middle of the night to check it. In saying this, people do expect more from smartphones as well. They expect it to be simple and uncomplicated. For many users now, this is the main or the only way that they access the internet. It's affordable, which is exponentially expanding our reach also, across ages, across cultures, across socioeconomic divides. Sorry, we'll just let the presentation catch up a little bit here. And locations. So I think we were hearing from the last presentation as well, the reach for mobile is becoming exponentially larger. And it's moving very, very quickly, which has been fantastic for us because traditional online research barriers are now set to become a thing of the past, most notably in emerging markets. And of course, it's becoming easier to use with each generation of operating system released. The touchscreen methodology and the graphical stimulus offered across the smartphone devices make for a far more enjoyable and engaging experience than typical online research surveys. Now, we polled our panel, and over 3/4 of the smartphone research participants we surveyed in January stated that they actually preferred the app surveys from traditional online surveys because of the experience they offer. The key areas were the interactivity, functionality, and ease of use. And these images here on screen at the moment, I'm sure these are not uncommon sights to anyone here. Of the most wonderful aspects of the smartphone is the ability to use it almost anywhere and any time. And we do, and I'm quite sure of quite a few people at the moment will still be monitoring their smartphones as I speak. So to utilize smartphone research effectively, we must better understand the role it plays in the consumer's life. Ultimately, how they use it and how we as an industry can utilize this information to capitalize on making functional and user-friendly options for consumers to provide their feedback. An obvious modification already alluded to in the earlier slides is to keep the survey short. The way the owner utilizes the handset means you have less time from the respondent. Surveys of up to 15 minutes can be run, and longer lengths will soon be tested. In all cases, the survey needs to be adapted and rethought for a smartphone format. But more on this later. I'm going to hand over to Sally now, who'll take you through her case studies. Thank you. Over to you now, Sally.
Thank you, Martin. And I think it's really interesting, and especially as Leslie pointed out in the previous session, I mean, there really is a compelling need to include mobile in our data collection. So being an advertising research firm, we particularly see this need for offering faster and more cost-effective ad research. So last year, we approached Research Now to conduct some pilot work to explore the feasibility, practicality, reliability, and value of mobile ad testing. Specifically, we were looking to determine whether our online ad testing methodology, called Ad Impact, could successfully adapt to a mobile platform. So our platform was first developed in the 1990s, really as a face-to-face ad testing tool, and now it's a highly regarded online ad testing methodology, and it's used in around 50 countries globally. I guess with the methodology, we have two key effectiveness measures. First is attention and bonding. So for us, in all of this early pilot work, it's really important for us to understand how or if these measures were going to differ if we completed the survey via mobile. So far, we've actually conducted two phases of parallel testing. So in 2011, which is probably really the kindergarten era for app-based mobile research, we tested some static advertising, and you could see here on the screen there's an image of a Listerine ad. And then this year, we could take advantage of, I guess, the amazing sort of race to technology that had occurred, and we could actually test some video advertising. And unfortunately, I can't play you these two ads, but the ads we tested this year were McDonald's ads for the Olympics and a very intriguing Kleenex toilet tissue ad, which some of, I guess, the Australian audience out there might recognise, but it's an interesting ad, and you can see it on YouTube later, but it talks about the Gripple effect. And I won't go into details now, but it was an interesting ad. So in the aim of our parallel testing was really to, firstly, literally compare the traditional online ad testing with mobile versus online on those two key measures of attention and bonding. But we really knowing, and also Leslie talked about this, you can't just move from one to the other without making any sort of changes. So we really wanted to understand the issues in moving from online to mobile. So we wanted to look at things like screen size, whether that will influence responses, whether location or the time of day that the survey was being taken would have an impact on responses. So at the end of the day, we really needed to learn more about how people respond on their mobile so that we could develop and refine how we would go about mobile ad testing in the future. So before we could even begin the parallel testing, we needed to really rethink this questionnaire. So as I said before, the history of our measurement was it started off face-to-face, we moved it to online, but it certainly, we were very aware that we couldn't just take what was a 20-minute questionnaire and plonk it onto a mobile and hope that people would be interested and able to use it. So we really went about editing out any superfluous words, looking at all the questions, making sure that each statement was short enough so that the next button was in the fold. And we really deliberately did everything we could to shorten it so that we maintained respondent engagement. So what we did in the first phase, we had two identically matched cells, one in Australia and one in the UK. In the smartphone cell, people looked at that Listerine ad and then completed the 5-minute questionnaire on their smartphone. And in the online cell, they completed the same 5-minute questionnaire via their desktop or laptop. Now, whilst those cells were identically matched, we did find some differences in the time of day that the interviews were completed. Now, 56% of the mobile surveys were completed out of working hours, compared to only 21% for online. So we saw this finding as, I guess, good news certainly for the research industry, as it suggests that mobile research will be able to reach people during a variety of activities throughout the day and night, I suspect. Also probably good news for us as employers, as it means that people may be spending less time at their desks completing surveys during their working day. The next finding I'd like to share with you is, I think, particularly important. So this is the outcome of the two different data collection methods. They were remarkably consistent across our key effectiveness measure called brand bonding. So this measure is actually calculated from multiple statements relating to how people feel about the brand after they've been exposed to the ad. So here you can see that people in Australia showed a higher level of bonding to the Listerine overall, those two columns on the left, but in both countries people were just as positive about the brand whether they'd seen the ad on their phone or on their computer. And when we drilled down further into the elements that make up brand bonding, we saw that the results were also consistent across online and mobile. So I think this is a particularly encouraging finding, and it suggests that mobile as a data collection platform does not impact on the measure of brand feelings, and therefore we can look to use it alongside traditional online surveys. It also opens up this enormous opportunity to capitalise on the advantages of mobile while still ensuring that we can, the continuity with these traditional measures. Now, the third finding, probably not surprising in hindsight, but it did show one area of inconsistency between the two parallel surveys. So here are the scores for attention, our other key effectiveness measure. So this, in the same way, attention as bonding is, attention is calculated from a series of statements and measures that level of interest in the creative. So it's looking to measure things like, is it original, does it stand out? So you can see here the scores on attention to the Listerine ad in both countries were actually lower on mobile than they were online. So at the time, we hypothesised that perhaps this was due to that smaller screen, and I think that is particularly important when you're looking at a piece of static advertising and you're comparing the screen of a mobile compared to some of the larger screens that people have on their computers. But we also thought it may have been because of the distractions, that respondents were on the move, so they just weren't paying as much attention, or it really could actually reflect the reality that consumers may be viewing mobile ads with less attention than online or TV. So it certainly warranted further investigation. We really wanted to understand, well, was it the smaller screen or these additional distractions, or what else was going on? So earlier this year, we conducted phase 2. Again, we used the same 5-minute questionnaire, but even in the year since we'd done the first survey, we were now able to add in a post-survey opt-in data collection. So we're really interested to track people's usage and mobile behaviour after the survey. Again, we use match samples, and as I showed you before, we could now use 2 video ads. So we tested the McDonald's ad and the Kleenex ad. Now, one of the interesting things with the passive data is we actually got 30 out of the over 200 respondents were quite happy to opt in to the passive data. So in that case, we felt that that was an encouraging result in that we were able to capture that many responses straight away. Now again, in phase 2, we had the difference in the time of day that the surveys were completed. So this time, 90% completed the smartphone survey out of hours, and 60% completed it, of the online survey completed out of working hours. Again, with bonding, we found that the measures were completely consistent across both of those brands. So here you've got on the screen the scores for the Kleenex ad and the McDonald's ad, and you see complete consistency across those 2 measures. And even when we drilled down further, you got those same consistencies. Now, what is really, I guess, exciting is that the attention ratings that we saw now using the video ad were actually consistent again. Now, this is a big difference from the Listerine ad, and suggesting to us that perhaps the video advertising is different to static advertising, and that it wasn't due to distractions or the smaller screen size, but may have been due just to the type of ad, so something to do with static advertising versus video advertising. Even when you drill down in those individual elements, remembering that attention is measuring how or whether the ad is going to cut through, and you can see here for the Kleenex ad, it's remarkably consistent across all of those individual elements, and same for the McDonald's ad. So finally, with this phase 2, when we took both of those measures together to calculate the proportion who are really committed after seeing the advertising, or they're just entertained, or their potentials, or they're untouched, again, you can see the consistency. So I think the important implication, and certainly a key learning for us, is that, you know, whether we'd been testing these ads on mobile only, or online only, or even in a combination, the recommendations we were making would have been the same. So I guess the bigger picture for us is that really this research shows us some encouraging consistencies when we are comparing online to mobile, but certainly there are a few differences, and there's certainly things that we've got to take account of with methodology. So for us, it was particularly around the type of advertising that we're testing. I think the interesting thing is, though, that really all of these advances in technology, and we're really seeing that from even the difference between phase 1 and phase 2, all of that has made such progress. So for us at Luma, really, it's opened up these opportunities to particularly use mobile to provide this faster, better, and potentially more cost-effective ad research. I think in terms of the bigger picture, it really, knowing that we get the same results about how people feel about a brand, whether they've seen the ad on their mobile or their computer, it's opening up this ability for us to track these feelings really at any location, at any time.
Thanks very much, Sally. Now, at this stage of the presentation, I'd like to just talk more about the passive data collected. In the 12 months since the first phase 1 research was completed, we'd actually at Research Now expanded our app to become a non-intrusive data collection tool. Essentially, we could collect passive data. As Sally said, we had around 30 respondents from the phase 2 of the research agree to take part in the additional stage, which actually took place 2 weeks after the phase 2 research of the study. So this passive data was collected using our app, and we were specifically interested in URLs visited, the apps that were used, and the music played on the respondents' smartphones. So we included this experimental phase initially to explore how the technology could be used to track post-advertising exposure. So that is, did the Kleenex ad result in visits to gripple.com? Or were those who saw the McDonald's ad more likely to participate in fast food or Olympic-related activities? Unfortunately, because of the smaller sample size we had, the smaller base size we had, we didn't actually come across either of those, but we did come across some other interesting bits of information that we weren't necessarily expecting. Some we were and some we weren't. To kick off, more males agreed to take part in the passive data collection than females. So we had around 65% of the males and 35% of females agreed to participate in passive data collection. The most popular websites visited, there's probably no surprises here, but Facebook, Google, and Wikipedia. The music listened to covered quite a wide variety, from Build Me Up Buttercup to Adele's greatest hits. And the most popular apps included Angry Birds, Play Store, and the browser. And one surprising fact was within 2 weeks of the passive data that's collected, 6 of our panelists checked their clock 2,511 times. Now that was fairly unexpected to us, and quite surprising to you, I'm sure, as well. So while the new platform presents some initial challenges, smartphone is rapidly evolving to being a relevant tool for gathering respondent data. By putting research into practice to better understand the minor setbacks and by harnessing the technological developments such as logical linkage with geolocation capabilities, the research on the go presents the opportunity to become an integral part of our toolkit as researchers. With 75% of mobile participants from a Research Now smartphone study that we completed earlier in the year, outlined the main disadvantage being that there aren't enough mobile research surveys. So the industry is faced with an opportunity to develop the smartphone and to be far more widely used with research and perhaps even the preferred channel for conducting surveys in today's mobilized society. Smartphone presents a new channel to entice engagement from population areas that are time poor and on the move. That's further opening up the lines of communication to deliver the opinion from a broader target audience. As you've seen in some of the earlier slides there, I mean, people are on the go, people are moving around. The opportunity to capture people in a setting that's not necessarily sitting at the computer is a huge amount more of interest, I think, to capturing real-time data, or at least as close to real-time data as we possibly can. And there's been a huge amount of technological development to enable mobile research. Even over the last 12 months, our app has been moving from a fairly basic structure to something that can now geolocate to essentially collect passive data as well. I mean, that's a very short time frame with huge leaps and bounds ahead. And it's certainly something that is able to be utilized in a huge range of different ways beyond what the online survey experience can offer, or typical online survey experience. But with all things new, the temptation to rush into them is there. So thinking more about the methodological development, let's not make the same mistakes we made with switching offline to online. A considered and tailored approach in conjunction with your fieldwork provider's expertise is very important, and it's definitely valuable to making this a sustainable and practical methodology for the years to come. And on that note, I leave these thoughts with you. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for Sally for sharing your research and experiences with us too. Cheers.